You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
By Andrew Ellis, the #1 podcast in the world for Arkansas Razorback baseball. And of course, we're brought to you by the #1 sports betting app in the state of Arkansas, Bet SARACEN Sportsbook. Download it on your iPhone or Android today. Appreciate you guys for being here on a live stream edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. We don't normally do this, so this is a big occasion. What are we doing? Why are we here? What is this thing? What does calling all casuals mean? Most of you already know, because most of you, frankly, aren't casuals. Most of you are tapping in with what we've got going on here at Inside Arkansas. This was a little bit of an impromptu last-minute decision to do this stream tonight. This will typically be on Wednesdays during baseball season, but, we adjust. We got things going on tomorrow. There will be basketball on Wednesday, and so we'll kind of adjust it however we need to. But again, appreciate everybody for being here. What the goal of this show is to meet everyone where they're at, to kind of, whether you're a casual baseball fan, whether you're someone that loves football of Arkansas, loves Razorback basketball, and then, you'll kind of check in with Razorback baseball once the season gets rolling. And of course, if they make it to Omaha, whatever your level of baseball fandom is, I want you to be able to come here, get your questions answered, be caught up on what you need to know, and understand the full context for Arkansas baseball. Because listen, baseball season's a grind. It's a long season. It's tough to be there every single game, and it's definitely tough to, throughout the entire offseason, be following all the new players, all whatever's going on. And so I get it. I completely understand that. And I also understand that there's going to be a lot of you in here that are not casuals, that are watching every Baumbastic, watching every game, know the players like the back of your hand. That's all fine and dandy. And for those people, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. This is a live chat edition. So listen, I'm going to be tapping in with what you guys have to say, listening no matter what. And we're just going to have a grand old time. But the reason why I feel like doing a show like this is important is, one, like I said, every fan is kind of different. Everyone views it through their own different lens. And some people maybe don't have the time to watch every game or whatever. And I want those people to still feel like they can enjoy Arkansas baseball. And by the time this team gets to Omaha and we're ready to, win that national championship and have the parade and everything, I want everybody who's watching to kind of feel like it was worth it, feel like it was a real journey, feel like you have a connection to the team. And again, that can come no matter what your walk of life is, no matter how many games you watch, whatever. But I hope that the Baumbastic Podcast can be of help to you. The context matters, man. It really does. And that context can be as simple as knowing these players and knowing their stories. And so you maybe have a little bit of background. Obviously, if you care about the players on the field, you're going to care more about the game. I mean, we all know, if your daughter's playing softball whether it's at a junior high or rec league, or if she's playing in, for a gold medal or something, you're going to care a lot because you love your daughter, obviously. So you care about the person out there. So that context of who these players are matters. The context of Dave Van Horn, I think we all can get behind his journey and wanting to see him succeed, wanting to see him win a national championship, but also just the baseball context. It's a 2-0 count. We got a runner on first base. Oh, man, we don't want to walk this guy. We're going to have to groove him a fastball. Oh, but that hitter's looking for a fastball. Like, there are all kinds of different things. And, of course, baseball is a very complicated game. Most of you in here, I'm seeing some familiar names. Most of you in here, y'all know ball. I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. But I understand there's people that, follow baseball a little bit more casually. And so they want to support the Razorbacks, want to get involved, but they don't want to deal with the nerd baseball fans who are going to sit here and yell at them about stuff. And I see that kind of stuff happening with other sports on campus, Razorback softball. People like to gatekeep their sport. That's not what we're doing here on the Baumbastic Podcast. We're doing the opposite of gatekeeping. Is there a term for the opposite of gatekeeping, of inviting as many people in? I guess it's just unlocking a door. That's what we're doing. And so we hope this is going to be a family. Hope that you guys can all feel like you're having fun, like you're learning something a little bit. And so, like I said, man, get your chats in. We're gonna get to whatever it is you guys want to talk about. I know it's gonna be a little bit of a light crowd today because it was a last minute decision. I got bullied into doing it tonight on the show today, but I asked for it, so it's all good. But again, hope as the season moves forward, we can get the viewership up. We can have more people in here. We can have a lot of fun. Few quick things that I want to touch on before we get into it, and of course, I'll get to your questions. We'll get to your comments. We'll do whatever we got to do. But a few things that I wanted to talk about on at least this first edition of whatever, the calling all casuals, what we're going to talk about. Of course, let's just talk about the simple stuff, the easy stuff, where Arkansas is ranked in the polls. Because again, most of you already know this, but for the casuals, that's what we're going to talk about. Arkansas, as of today, ranked number 5 in the coaches poll. And it sucks for college baseball because there's not really a go-to poll. There's not an AP poll for college baseball. There's not BCS rankings. There's not a computer. I guess there are computers, but, random little different sites that rank it and stuff. But there's not like a cream of the crop. This is the official rankings. There's not a college baseball committee putting these rankings together. So by my count, let me see if I'm making sure this is right here. I feel like the Razorback account tweeted it out not too long ago. They were 4 by somebody. They were 7th on one other one. They were 10 on another. They're in that 4 to 10 range. That's kind of where Arkansas is at, which, in baseball, what we're trying to do, you're trying to be in that top 8. You're trying to go back to Omaha. This is basically the sweet spot of where, honestly, Arkansas is ranked most years. Most years going into the season nationally, you talk to people about Arkansas, they say, yeah, Dave Van Horn, very good, very solid, very consistent. They're going to be very good, but they might not be the best team. We kind of like this other team better. And frankly, with the way that the seasons have played out, that's been an accurate prediction. And so it's honestly up to Arkansas to go out there and kind of prove those narratives wrong. But I do think that's very interesting, kind of seeing where Arkansas is at. And I think it kind of speaks to the roster that Arkansas has. I mean, Arkansas last year in 2025, I think a lot of people agree, the best roster we've seen at the University of Arkansas. I can't speak to anything prior to my lifetime. I'm 28 years old. I really, of course, the DVH era has been the era that I grew up with, the era that I now cover professionally. And so those are the ones I'm very qualified, I feel like, to speak on. There's not been a better roster at the University of Arkansas than the one that we saw this past year. Just from the pitching depth, top to bottom. I mean, you had, 4 first-round picks, Behiva Aloy, Gage Wood, Zach Root, Charles Davalon, all 4 kind of going in those top 40 picks. That was special. You have even the sophomore class, some of these guys that are going to be huge prospects this year, they are a part of that mix as well. And so I just think from the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, even some senior guys like Logan Maxwell, I feel like Arkansas had the most talent, the most depth that we've ever seen. And frankly, moving forward, that's going to be the new standard at which we judge everything at the University of Arkansas, if I'm being honest with you. Of course, that will be replaced by if some team wins the national championship. That will then be the standard. But if you've been listening to the show for a couple years now, you've probably heard me say a lot. 2018 was kind of that year where I felt like Arkansas had all the pieces. You had Blaine Knight on Friday night. You had Casey Murphy, a Rogers native. He was your Saturday guy, and he was very consistent, very solid. You had a closer in Matt Cronin. You had a couple big-time relievers in Barrett Lowski, Jake Reindl, who were kind of your big circle of trust guys. And then you just go around the diamond. I mean, you had seniors, Carson Shaddy, Luke Bonfield. You had freshmen, Casey Martin, Heston Kerstad. You had a sophomore in center field, Dominic Fletcher, and just kind of everything all in between. For a long time, I kind of was like, man, that is kind of the team. And, of course, that team finished their season in Omaha, finished in the College World Series finals, was one play away from winning the national title. I don't think I have to tell you guys, no matter how much of a casual or a diehard you are, I don't think I have to tell you what play it was that got in the way of that team winning the national title. But that was always kind of the team I would look at and say, all right, if like the next, when Hagen Smith was there, I would look at saying Hagen Smith and I'd say, all right, how does he compare to Blaine Knight? If you've got a lights out closer, well, how does he compare to Matt Cronin? If you've got a lineup, how do how does it compare? And I really feel like the 2025 team was the first that truly passed all those tests. Not that they were better at every single spot, but there was not a weakness in the roster. And really, if you go back to this time last year, I think Arkansas wound up being a better overall roster, definitely a better overall lineup than we expected, but that was also reflected in the rankings. People kind of thought Arkansas was a very popular national title pick because you can kind of look on paper and know what Arkansas had on the mound. You felt like the improvement could maybe be there in the lineup. That's kind of where people saw Arkansas, not as much this year. I wouldn't say people are down on the Razorbacks, although I have seen a few Omaha 8 projections that have not had Arkansas in them. And so, you can take that as disrespect, whatever you want. But I do feel like Arkansas is getting a fair amount of respect. I mean, we're seeing these preseason rankings coming out. Hell, we saw Carson Wiggins, preseason All-American. He's not even going to pick up a baseball, but he's a preseason All-American. So people, I think, respect Dave Van Horn, of course. They respect the program and understand it's going to reach a certain level. And I feel like that's kind of the story of this season, if we're getting into like narratives and sort of like themes of how we're going to feel about this team, I think that's going to be the kind of storyline. And honestly, I just had this idea as I'm speaking to you right now. We're tired of hearing oh yeah, Arkansas is good, but not good enough. Arkansas can get to Omaha, but they're not going to win the national title. And yeah, we think they've got a good lineup, but it's maybe not the best. And, Gabe Gackle's a good arm, but maybe this Friday guy's better. And I think back to that 2018 team, and they carried themselves like they were that team night in, night out. And Blaine Knight, of course, carried himself like he was that dude. It didn't matter who he was against. Casey Mize, whoever, he was going at him and giving him his best stuff. Brady Singer and out pitching him. I love that kind of dog that they played with, and I really hope this team carries that similar sort of edge. And so we'll see. But at least nationally speaking, if you're wondering kind of where Arkansas fits in the overall picture of college baseball, they're right up there near the top, but there is a little bit of a trepidation, a little bit of hesitation for people to go all in, especially with Arkansas's season ending in such a tragic and weird way. I think there's a lot of people kind of have that feel of maybe Arkansas really is cursed. Hell, I think a lot of us in the fan base maybe even kind of feel that way a little bit. But, it's up to Arkansas to kind of dispel a lot of those narratives. Few other things I did want to talk about real quick. I'm going to do this rant now. I've given this rant on the Baumbastic podcast before, but I wanted to talk about this. Shout out to Kingsley, who, by the way, Kingsley is like one of the main people I thought of when I wanted to do this show to kind of like, discuss with Razorback fans of all different, levels of fandom and sort of understandings. Because Kingsley, I've noticed the last few years, he's always supported us here at Inside Arkansas, and even back before we were Inside Arkansas. And I think he's definitely at this point becoming a little bit of a baseball guy. And, I'm sure he was a baseball fan growing up a little bit, but I can tell his baseball fandom is kind of growing each year. And so he's kind of the perfect guy that I thought of where I'm like, man, I want him to be able to get up to speed and kind of know everything, do what we're doing here. And I was texting him about some like specific stats because he was saying, hey, sometimes you'll say a stat and I'm kind of wondering, I'm like, what is that? Like, what does that mean? I've also had another listener, I'm not going to say his name, but I believe his name is Pablo, who has told me, sometimes I'll listen to the show, but I don't even know what you're saying. Like, I don't even like you're listing off things. It's just terminology that I'm not familiar with, which, I want to be cognizant of and I want to be understanding of. So this is a perfect time for me to do this rant. I have always been a believer, well, maybe not always, but recently I've really come around to the idea that batting average might be the most overrated stat in baseball. Not quite as overrated as pitching wins, because I think that's certainly something that's a stupid thing to point to. Like if we're discussing who's a better starting pitcher between two different guys, don't tell me their win-loss record, because I really genuinely don't care, because we know pitching wins and losses are kind of determined by other factors outside of that pitcher's effectiveness and certain things like that. And so I think that's one that's overrated, but I think we all kind of understand that pitching wins are a weird stat. Batting average isn't that far behind for me. And so my go-to offensive stat is OPS. And it doesn't have to be yours. I'm sure there's some people that say, well, I like to look at this. I like to look at slugging. OPS, I feel like needs, like as we move forward in society, as we continue to advance, I think OPS needs to be more to the forefront. You're starting to see it now, like whenever a hitter's at the plate and they put up the little graphic, the little plate there that has their name, their, maybe their height, weight, or where they're from. And then it'll have like home runs, RBI, batting average. You're now starting to see OPS there, which I really appreciate as a big OPS guy. And what it basically is, for those that are not familiar, on base percentage plus slugging percentage. The reason why it's perfect is because that is literally how you measure a good hitter. How often are you getting on base? How often are you hitting the ball with authority, hitting doubles, triples, whatever. And listen, you can have a high slugging percentage by just hitting for a high average. So if you're really that good, because we always talk about, would you rather have, a guy who's hitting 270, but he's going to hit home runs, or would you rather have that guy that's hitting 340? He's not hitting for power, but he's getting on base a lot. Like, those are the conversations that people have. OPS basically accounts for all of it and tells you who is the most impactful players. You can fake a good batting average. You can have a good batting average without actually really being that impactful of a hitter. And you can also have a low batting average and still be a very dynamic, very, relevant, very valuable hitter to your lineup, it's really hard to fake a bad OPS, especially when your sample size gets really large. Like, you really don't see that. It's hard, especially again with a large sample size. If you are, either getting on base at a high level, hitting for power at a high level, that will be reflected in your OPS, where batting average doesn't really tell that full story. I mean, just for, example, if a guy is 2 for 10 at the plate, that would be a 200 batting average. But if he drew a couple walks and those 2 hits are a home run that drove in 2 and a double that cleared the bases and drove in 3, obviously we could all look at that and say, oh yeah, he drove in 5 runs. Like, that's a very impactful player. Well, you would look at the batting average and say, yeah, but I mean, he's hitting 200. Or you could say, well, he drew a couple walks, so his on-base percentage is a little bit higher. His slugging is pretty good because he's hitting, for power, and the runs are there, the run production. And so you're going to hear me use OPS a lot throughout the season, and I feel like most of you have a pretty good grasp of at least what that means. But I just wanted to, get that out there, and we'll continue as you guys get in here, as we get more and more people that are tapping in with this show and understand what we're doing. We'll, we can have all these discussions about how to quantify who's really good and who's not. I'm going to get to the chat in just a second. I know I was trying to let it fill up a little bit, trying to let everybody get their questions in. Not a ton of people, dialed in for baseball right about now. But again, that's the purpose of our show. One last thing I want to talk about before we get to the chat, and I want to give another shout out to one of our listeners here at Inside Arkansas, Hayden Ulmer. Asked recently, he said, hey, are you going to do a show? Because last year I did something that was basically along the lines of like, who's like going to be the fan favorite type of guy on the team? Who's going to be the like biggest personality, the guy that we're all riding behind? And if you remember, I said Rocco Pepe, which aged poorly because Rocco Pepe wound up not being in the everyday lineup, wound up not having as much impact on the field. But if you really think about it, if you watched Rocco Pepe and you were at Baum and you were seeing the team interact, you probably understand why I picked Rocco Pepe as my kind of dirtbag fan favorite type of guy. And by the way, Rocco Pepe still involved with the program, working for the strength staff, which is awesome. But yeah, I pick out players like that I think the fan base is going to really like their personality, really like the way they carry themselves. And honestly, you're going to be a very big personality for this team. Nobody epitomizes that more, I feel like, than Casey Opitz. You guys remember Casey Opitz, the catcher for Arkansas? I guess that would have been 2018 to 2021. Was like the full-time catcher 2019 and 2021. Casey Opitz was like on a team full of guys that were pretty even keel and that didn't really talk a ton. Casey Opitz was the personality on those teams. I really feel like was a huge vocal presence for Arkansas, and you love to see it. And I think there's some candidates on this very team. Last year's team honestly had a lot of it, because I think Cam Kojal had a ton of personality. He's of course back on this year's team. I feel like Charles Davalon was a guy that maybe not the most outspoken human being, but when he goes out on the baseball field, he has this energy about him, this very vibrant personality that you can definitely see when he's up at the plate. And I loved having him in that leadoff role. Weirdly enough, I think Vahiva's weird, because you talk to him outside of a baseball diamond, Vahiva's like hard to get words out of, like doesn't really want to talk a ton, is not really a loud guy whatsoever, but you watch him play and there's a little bit of an aura, if you will, about how Vahiva Aloy carries himself. And so I feel like last year's team had a lot of that kind of set them apart from a vibe standpoint. This year for me, this choice is very obvious. Now, Kojal, of course, a guy that's, certainly going to have a lot of personality. I think he's going to be an important leader for this team. I also think guys like Gabe Yackel and Ryder Helfrich, who I believe are team captains, they're going to be a very important leadership presence. But in terms of the guy who epitomizes what we call a dirtbag, what we call a true, a baseball grinder, the type of guy that's like a jersey's always dirty, maybe wears his pants a weird way, maybe has these weird mannerisms, but just a guy who has that confidence about himself. It's Micah New, man. It's Arkansas's new center fielder, who really is one of my, he's a stud player. So, and he's definitely not going to fall out of the lineup the way Rocco Pepe did. Micah New is such a stud at the plate, in the field, in the locker room, on Twitter, it's like, he's just that guy. And if you guys saw, the team put out a little video of Razorback baseball players doing impressions of each other, and damn near every player on the team did an impression of what Mike Anu does at the plate. He does this weird little waddle with his hands up here. He's got this weird toe tap thing going on. He taps 3 times. It's like just a weird little mannerism that it's not going to take long for you guys to kind of figure out. And I'm sure people at Baum will be kind of doing impersonations of it. I think that's going to be something that I think really gets the fan, a guy that, fans will be able to look at, like kids, 5-year-olds will be at Baum and they'll be like, oh, look at Mike Anu, that helps. And he's also just a dude who has a confidence, man, has a swag about him. And so, you guys who have been listening to the show a lot have heard me give this rant 1,000 times, but for those that don't remember, Mike Anu's career was not this like star-studded story the entire time. I mean, he starts his career at the University of New Orleans and really didn't do a ton there. Was in the Southland Conference, which is not one of the top baseball conferences in the country by any means at all. I mean, there's some stinkers in there, and he was just okay. Hit around 250, had a few home runs, stole a few bases, played all over the place. He was playing infield early in his career. He was a second baseman for the most part. Goes to Marshall this past year. Now, going to Marshall was a big deal because the Southland Conference, one of the worst in college baseball, the Sun Belt, where Marshall's at, is certainly not the SEC, but it's a lot closer to the SEC than it is to the Southland. And so there's some really good teams in there. I mean, Coastal, Louisiana Lafayette's in there. I feel like Sam Houston State, they've always been pretty good. There's just some good teams in the Sun Belt. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few. I feel like Troy had a good year last year. Like, there's just some actual draft picks and there's some real arms that you're facing. And so that was a big step up for him. And his numbers got better across the board. And they all kind of started around April, May. He started just tearing it up at the plate, hits 11 home runs down the stretch, ends up the year with 15 home runs, and 11 of them were like down the stretch. And so seemed like the light bulb kind of went off for him in his junior year. And he carries it into the Cape Cod League this summer. And so he wins Cape Cod MVP and went from a guy that was not on anybody's draft board to all of a sudden he's turning down money during the draft. And he's one of the top senior prospects in the entire country. And I got a chance to talk to Mike Anu on the field after a scrimmage the other day where he hit a ball 462 feet off of steel leaves. And I kind of asked him about that. I'm like, hey, man, you've kind of really helped yourself a lot and you've kind of risen your profile and now people are starting to notice you. Like, how cool is that? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he was like, I've always been that guy, man. Like, I've always been a stud. And, people are now starting to realize it. I've always been that guy. Like, he just kind of has that confidence about him. And I'm like, dude, you were hitting 250 at New Orleans 2 years ago. What are you talking about? But listen, these dirtbags, if you will, these Peyton Holt type of guys, they're a little bit crazy. They're just wired a little bit differently. And I think that's awesome. And so I think he's my early prediction for, not even fan favorite, but like when you guys watch Mike Anu play, there will be no debate about it. Like, that dude is a dirtbag. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's hop into the chat. But actually, before we do that, I want to talk to you guys about insurance for just a second, if you will. One thing that really sets OZK Insurance apart, one of our proud partners here at Inside Arkansas, is they're an independent insurance agency. That means they're not just tied to one company. They shop a multitude of A-rated carriers to find the very best coverage and price for you. And now they've paired that with something you don't usually see from an independent agency, a full-service mobile app with the OZK Insurance app. You can see all your policies under one roof. You can pay your bills, request roadside assistance, file claims, request policy changes, or even get new quotes, all from your phone. So you get the best part of an independent agency, the choice, the flexibility, and the real people with the convenience of modern tech. If you're tired of being stuck with one carrier or chasing down paperwork, go to ozkinsurance.com and search OZK Insurance in the App Store or Google Play. Local agency, national level options, one powerful app. That is OZK Insurance. So let's see what the chat has to say. I appreciate everybody for doing this. Seriously, man. Like, it's what's today's date? February 3rd. Back in my day, when I was growing up, on February 3rd, it was like a sin to talk about baseball. And you couldn't find anybody to talk baseball with you. I was, you know how tough it is to be growing up in the state of Louisiana, obsessed with Arkansas Razorback baseball and having nobody to talk to. I can't even get people to talk about college baseball, period, let alone Arkansas baseball. So I hope that for some of you, you can view this as like, hey, this is where I can, this is a place I can call home for sure. We're going to start. I saw this is the first comment we got from our guy Shane, who's always been supporting us over here at Inside Arkansas. He says, okay, bro, you got me, but basketball has been so good. I'll be watching this one, though. So this is okay. This is something that I talk about a lot, and I'm probably the wrong person to give this spiel because obviously my life is very tied to sports. I follow Razorback sports for a living. I kind of live and die with all these programs. And I understand that there are people who like will be in football season in October, November, and they're like, all right, it's football season, football season, football season. And then when basketball season comes, they're all right, basketball season, basketball season, basketball season. And then when baseball comes, they do that. I understand that because it's like, you got to compartmentalize things. And of course, you've also got like your wife, kids, your job, your whatever, your family. So, you just don't have that much room in your life for that many obsessions. But that's why I feel like Inside Arkansas exists. You don't have to choose between our basketball or baseball. We're going to have podcasts of both going out just about every day, especially these next few months. And so I hope that we are able, like, as we move forward, as you guys continue this journey with us, you'll realize, man, you don't have to pick and choose. You can do it all. And hopefully we do a good enough job of kind of keeping you up to speed to where you don't have to work that hard. You don't have to put in that much effort. And that's what I want this show to be, where, you don't have to watch every single Baumbastic Podcast episode. Although I shouldn't say that out loud. I do want you to, of course, but like, I want people who are like, not consuming baseball content all year round to come in and be like, hey, who the hell is TJ Pompey? And then we can talk about who TJ Pompey is. We can tell his story and just kind of get everybody up to speed. But that was the first comment, so we appreciate you, Shane. This one's a very easy one. Our guy Lazy Turtle, who I feel like he used to be HH back when YouTube used to have the names flipped. But he says, can you explain to the casuals why they should get off the couch and attend an SEC Friday night at Baum? Well, this is a very easy sell for me. When you're flipping the channel and you're watching baseball on any given weekend, you can flip that game and, at any given moment, the guy who's pitching for whatever team, it could be their 5th best pitcher. It could be their 11th best pitcher. It could be a freshman that's never played. It could be their best pitcher. It could be their 3rd best. You don't really know. But when you do know is Friday night or Thursday in some weeks, and Arkansas is going to have their Thursday through Saturday series, but game 1 SEC series opener, you're always getting the best on the best. And when you get the best on the best, there's just a little bit extra tension that comes with this. And, when you're in a locker room, in a baseball locker room, and you have one guy on the team who's your best pitcher, he carries himself a certain way, and you have a trust, you have a belief in him. And so if you go out there on a Friday night and your ace gets touched up, that reverberates throughout the entire locker room. And the same works on that end, where if you're able to hit a home run off of the opposing team's ace, everyone in that dugout notices, and it feels a little bit different. Like the stakes just feel higher. And of course you get low scoring games typically on these Friday nights. It's, very rarely 14-12 in game 1 to start a series, but you're also likely seeing closers. You're likely seeing the top bullpen arms for both of these teams. And we've seen Arkansas in years past kind of do a little combo where back in the day they were doing like Hunter Holland would start the game and Hagen Smith would close it. And that was just like, hey, Dave was like, hey, we're just going to guaranteed win game 1 and that'll be it. And we've seen, most years, that Blaine Knight year, it would be Blaine Knight, an inning of Jake Reindl, an inning of Barrett Lowski, and then an inning of Matt Cronin. And like, that was it. That was their formula. And so every team goes into a weekend with kind of how they want the series to go and how they want their pitching plan to go. And you got to fight like hell for every inning, every out, every run, everything. And it's always cool on those Friday nights to see who kind of sets the tone. Plus, not to mention, of course, you're also in any given weekend, like at Baum this year, the first 2 home series, you've got Mississippi State, who is currently top 5 in like every preseason poll, got the most loaded roster. They hired Virginia's coach, so he brought over a lot of his players, had like, I think the number 1 portal class, absolutely loaded. You're going to see legitimate Friday night. I don't even know who their Friday night guy is this year. I don't know if it'll be the Kyle Steven kid that's coming back from last year, maybe one of the Virginia kids. I don't know, but you're going to see a legit Friday night arm versus Gabe Gackle, most likely a top 10 matchup, depending on where you look, maybe a top 5 matchup. We'll see how these teams start off, but like that's big time stuff. Then the second weekend at Baum is against Florida. By the way, on Friday night, they're going to be honoring Norm DeBryan. Like, there's just a little bit different buzz in the air. Those game 1 of SEC series are big time, man. Shout out to Samuel Brooks. We got him in the chat here. He says, Andrew, who do you think will hit the best in 2026 for the Diamond Hogs and what percentage? Example, Kojal 328. I wish I had seen this before I made fun of batting average, but no, I do think this is like, again, I'm not anti batting average because I do think it's a useful stat. It's just there's other ones that you can also point to, but I think this is a good case because as much as I said you can kind of fake a good batting average, it's pretty rare that someone leads their team in batting average and they're not extremely good at baseball and one of the best players on the team. Logan Maxwell fit that description last year, hit 356 for the Hogs. He led the team in average. Vahivo Lowe was right behind him at 350. I believe Kojal hit 333 last year, if I'm not mistaken, which is the highest among the returning everyday starters. I believe Ryder Helfrich hit 305, and I believe Kahio Aloy hit 317. This is off the top of my head. These might not be perfect. I'm fairly sure of those numbers because I've seen them 1,000 times at this point. I think Kahio Aloy was kind of in that 317, 315 range, and Ryder Helfrich hit 305. And then Nolan Souza and Reese Robinette were kind of there as well, but I don't think they're going to take that big of a leap. I think Kojal is kind of the obvious candidate and the one that I'll probably go with because you look at this Razorback lineup, there's a lot of guys that I think will hit for a high average. But, you know, there's a little bit of swing and miss there. There's a little bit of they don't mind striking out. Kahio Aloy certainly doesn't mind striking out. Ryder Helfrich definitely doesn't mind striking out. And, you know, Nolan Souza, I think Nolan Souza's a stud. I think he's going to have an awesome year. I don't think he's going to lead the team in average. Now, he could lead the team in OBP because he does like to draw some walks, which, by the way, is a factor in this discussion. Brennan Iredale had one of the worst batting averages in the everyday lineup last year, but one of the highest OBPs because he got hit by like 15 pitches, drew 40-something walks. So, you know, things to consider. But the reason I go Cam Kojal, well, for a lot of reasons. One, doesn't strike out a ton. Now, he will strike out. He's not like Charles Davalon where he's like incapable of swinging and missing, but definitely a much lower strikeout rate than some of Arkansas's other top returners like Kahio or Helfrich. He also doesn't walk a ton, which frankly is something I want to see him do a little bit more. Like I think he drew 18 or 19 walks last year. I mean, we're talking 60 games. You're Cam Kojal. You're one of the, you know, not the number one guy, but like you're one of the more feared guys in the lineup. You hit 15 home runs. You hit 333. Like you should be drawing more than a walk every 3 or 4 games. You know what I mean? So I'd like to see Kojal maybe be a little bit more patient at the plate, but that's why I think he's a good candidate to lead the team in average. One, not a ton of swing and miss. There's power in there, but like he doesn't necessarily try to hit for power. And I think he's just so aggressive where, you know, so like some of these guys might get walked a good bit. He'll draw his every now and then, but I think he's going to be looking to hack up there for the most part. Let's see. Yeah, see a lot of folks. Let's see. Okay, Lathan BD says, "Who is your Omaha 8 for this year?" So I shouldn't have pulled this chat up honestly because I don't have an Omaha 8 for you. I did the math yesterday. I crunched the numbers internally myself, and I think Arkansas has a 69% chance of making it back to Omaha. I think they're going to make it back. I can't guarantee any further than that. I can't guarantee you a natty. I can't even guarantee you they get to the title series. I can't guarantee you that they don't pee on themselves once they get to a big moment. But I do think Arkansas is going to get back to Omaha. I think they're going to probably have a strong chance to be a national seed. So I'm going to have Arkansas in my Omaha 8. I really like Tennessee's roster. And I've said this a lot this offseason, but everyone's kind of assuming, I say everyone, a lot of people I think are writing Tennessee off because, of course, you lose your head coach. That's a very big deal. But, man, that roster stayed together. That roster didn't go anywhere. And I think they've got a ton of talent. It's going to be hard to keep those guys out of Omaha. You know, for their sake, hopefully they don't have to come to Fayetteville for a super regional and get that ass whipped again. But I think Tennessee's really strong. I mean, I hate to say it, LSU is going to be very good again. I'm a little bit, you know, I don't know if LSU's like a juggernaut that's like ready to run it back, but I think they're going to be in that mix. Mississippi State is another one, and I'm listening to a lot of SEC teams here because I'm mostly familiar with them, but I've got to throw in some non-SEC teams. Georgia Tech has maybe the best player in the country, Drew Burris, a really good outfielder, going to be in that Golden Spikes Award kind of list. UCLA is a team that Arkansas played in Omaha last year, probably going to have the number 1 overall draft pick in Rock Chalowski. They seem to have a really good squad. I haven't looked at the details of their pitching staff and all that, but it seems like they got a lot of production back from a team that made it to Omaha last year. And so, UCLA is going to be hard to look at. How many teams am I at here now? Like 6? I think there's going to be more than 2 SEC teams make it. Come back to me in a week or so, and I might have to do that. I might have to go with the little Omaha, like give an official, here are my 8 teams. But honestly, I'm a hog guy through and through. So I'm very comfortable speaking about the Hogs. I'm not quite as comfortable speaking about some of these, especially non-SEC teams. Devin Talley, we appreciate Devin Talley. I mean, absolute stud. Says part of the fun of the season is all the Baumbastic shows. Having Ellis narrate the season has been great. Well, I really genuinely appreciate that, and appreciate you for always tapping in and supporting, man. And I hope some other people end up feeling that way. Maybe even some that this is their first year on this journey. Ryan, my arch nemesis. I say that jokingly, but Ryan, who I know loves baseball. Ryan may be miserable during football season. He may be miserable during basketball, and he'll be miserable during baseball, but he does love baseball. I know he does. But he wants to know who is the most important position player and pitcher for this season to be successful. Okay, well, cop out is, say, Gabe Gackle, of just being like, yeah, your Friday night guy needs to be really good. It's probably even a little bit of a cop out to say Hunter Dietz. Hunter Dietz, it's not that Hunter Dietz has to be very good. I just think that if he were very good, it solves a lot of issues for this Arkansas team. Because when you talk to people nationally about their concerns for Arkansas, a lot of them say, well, we love Gackle and, we trust Matt Hobbs and we think the lineup will be good. But they had a lot of depth last year. Are they going to replicate some of this pitching depth? And I've said for years that I think pitching depth can be overrated at times. And I think Arkansas's team last year is actually a good example of this, because Arkansas season ended and they had like 5 other arms that they could have used, and Parker Coyle wasn't even available. But it's like, they got to the end of the year and it's like they had all this depth, but LSU had the better ace, and that's why LSU moved on. Believe it or not, that's a fact. LSU beat Arkansas in Omaha because they won game 1 with Cade Anderson. Game 2 that Arkansas got to play against LSU, Arkansas had played 2 elimination games 2 days before. Maybe they win that game and force another one, but it's like Arkansas was kind of running on fumes, and they were running on fumes because they lost game 1, and they lost game 1 because they didn't have the better ace. So it's like, if you're choosing between having depth versus having 5 or 6 guys that we don't have to ask any questions about, and I always go back to that 2018 team where I'm like, Blaine Knight, Casey Murphy, sometimes Isaiah Campbell. He was a freaking roller coaster that year. And then you had Cronin, Losky, Reindl in the bullpen. That's 6 guys, one of which is very shaky. That was what Arkansas went through the entire postseason with. And they didn't lose because of their pitching depth. They lost because they dropped a fly ball in a 3-2 game. But that was enough for that team to get through it. You look at what LSU did last year. I mean, you had those 2 big-time starters, Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson. And, Chase Shores was good for them out of the bullpen. They had a couple guys step up and give them some innings. But it wasn't like this group of 9 guys that LSU loved. So I'm getting off track here, but to answer the question of who would be the most important pitcher, I think it's got to be Hunter Dietz because of how high the ceiling is. And I think if he ends up being who he's capable of being, which he's projected right now as like a potential top 40, top 50, maybe even back half of the first round pick type of guy, if he lives up anywhere close to that, that gives Arkansas a pretty electric 1-2 punch, and Gabe Gackle, Hunter Dietz, 1 right, 1 left, both are 98. So I think that would be, that would be where my head would be at. I think Gibbler's kind of underrated because I don't know if we still don't know if Gibbler's going to start or close or maybe some weird combination of both, but he's kind of the Gabe Gackle of this year, in my opinion, where again, I don't know what his role is going to be, but you're going to need him if you're going to accomplish what you need. And I love seeing Gabe Gackle kind of take that step down the stretch last year. Would love to see what Cole Gibbler's looking like in year 2. And in terms of position player, I think I will go with Mike Anu. And I'm going with Mike Anu, assuming that, Ryder Helfrich's going to continue to just do what he did last year. Cam Kojal just do what he did last year. If any of those guys are way worse, that would certainly change things. But I'm kind of operating assuming that at least they're going to hold relative to what they've done in the past. I think Mike Anu, because, as much as we're very high on him, this is still a very big jump in competition. Not as big of a jump as going from the Southland, but he's now facing SEC pitching consistently. What's the batting average going to look like? I don't know, but they need him to do a good bit of damage because you look at the outfield, Kahio Aloy in right field is going to have a lot of production, no doubt about it, but left field is kind of a spot that's up for grabs right now, and you're not necessarily going to get potentially a ton of huge power out of left field unless something really shakes out. I mean, maybe Zach Stewart ends up starting every day and doing that, but I think if you're looking at this outfield and comparing it to years past, and you think about what Arkansas had last year, I mean, you had Davalon on the left. Justin Thomas was solid as hell, hit over 300, just under 10 home runs. Logan Maxwell leads the team in batting average. That's a lot for Arkansas to replace. I think Kahio Aloy is going to help a lot if he just does what he did last year in right field. But I feel like Micah New being a legitimate 12 to 15 home run type of guy and maybe a 270 to 290 average, if you guarantee me that, I feel very good about this Arkansas lineup. Samuel wants to know, when does SEC play start for Arkansas and who do they play first? Yeah, I'm sure. I think he commented this before I said it, but yeah, Mississippi State, and it's mid-March. It's whatever weekend before the NCAA tournament starts in basketball. I know that because I just looked up these dates the other day. But yeah, it's like mid-March, like maybe the 14th or something like that, like the weekend of like the 13th, 15th. And yeah, Mississippi State at Baum. That should be an absolute doozy, man. Hickory Hog, our guy, says, Andrew, last year Gage Wood was considered the third, fourth starting option to start the year. Who is the best candidate to make a Wood-sized jump this year, and why is it Hunter Dietz? Well, yeah, I mean, listen, Hunter Dietz, in terms of like upping your production in a big way, Hunter Dietz has 5 outs recorded his entire college career. He's going to record more than that before you can even get a beer on Saturday. You know what I mean? Hopefully in one game he's doubling his inning pitch or whatever. So I'm not going to even include Hunter Dietz in this realm here. So, Gage Wood type jump is tough. And by the way, I'm glad you said that Gage Wood was considered the third, fourth starting option last year. He was, and it wasn't because we underrated him. It's just Arkansas had a lot of proven dudes right at the top of that rotation. I mean, Zach Root, I don't think there was any question, any debate from the moment he committed to Arkansas. We all knew that dude was going to be in the starting rotation. Gabe Gackle wound up leaving the rotation, but like preseason, none of us, and Gabe Gackle didn't even throw that well in the scrimmages leading up to the season. So there were actually some red flags that popped up that we kind of ignored. But part of why we ignored it is because it was like, yeah, of course Gabe Gackle is going to be in the rotation. So those two dudes were kind of like locked in, Root and Gackle. And then it was just a matter of, hey, Beidel, or Wood. They end up going with Wood, which, of course, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, duh. But yeah, they're like, there were a lot of people in the Arkansas fan base who did not buy Gage Wood as a starting pitcher. And I remember actually arguing that they should use Gage Wood as a closer. And I was like, hey, you can use him twice a weekend and do all this cool stuff. And he's going to be like a little mini Kevin Kopps. And now I've kind of thought about that with Cole Giller a little bit. But what Gage Wood did was pretty crazy, man. And he took himself from like a, 4th or 5th round pick type of prospect to a first round prospect. And so I'm trying to think, because there's really not many Razorback pitchers that are in that kind of realm. And a lot of the guys that I think are candidates to take a big jump aren't necessarily going to do it from a draft profile standpoint. But give me Colin Fisher. Give me Colin Fisher, man. And Colin Fisher's a guy that's very interesting to me because, I mean, his career starts in the weekend rotation. Now, it was a 4-game series at home against James Madison, but his first career weekend as a baseball player for Arkansas, he started on the mound and went like 5 innings. I don't think he gave up a run. Like, just looked like a legitimate weekend starting option, frankly, from the day he arrived on campus, and had a really good outing in Arlington in a clutch situation, earned a lot of trust, wound up being the midweek starter for Arkansas. And you go back and look at his numbers, tremendous across the board. Not a crazy strikeout rate, but he wasn't walking anybody, wasn't giving up too many hits, had an ERA under 3. Like, in fact, I think he was named to at least 1 or 2 freshman All-American sites, depending on where you looked. And I mean, he was a stud as a freshman, and then he gets hurt, which cuts his freshman season short. And I feel like last year he wasn't able to really like develop much, wasn't able to really take a jump because he was still kind of working his way back from injury. I think you're going to see a little bit better version of him. I don't think the stuff is going to be, like Gage Wood took his 92, 93 mile an hour fastball, turn it into 97, 99. I'm not asking, like, that's not what's about to happen with Colin Fisher. I'll just tell you that. And really, I don't know if there is a guy who's really going to take their stuff to that different level. Maybe Cooper Dossett, who's apparently throwing 99 and looking like a closing option. But I don't think it's going to be like a blow you away with talent type of thing for Colin Fisher. But I think he's just going to be damn good, really effective, and I think he might end up having his say in he might end up having his say in this starting rotation, low key. Clayton Ashcraft says, a few weeks ago, the question mark for our team was our pitching. Now DVH is talking about all these guys sitting our lineup down. Do you think this is our pitching being better or hitting being worse? So this is the age-old question. Anytime you scrimmage against yourself, no matter what happens, you got to kind of look at it and say, does this mean good, bad, something in between? I don't know. For what it's worth, these scrimmages that happened the last 2 weeks happened indoors in the indoor Fowler facility or whatever. And Dave was actually even talking yesterday about how, like, if it's hit outside of the infield, they don't have a full outfield in that facility. So they're going off of TrackMan. And, you hit it 365 and you hit it 108 off the bat. Okay, we're going to give you a hit on that one. We'll give you a double or whatever. But if it's kind of has a little bit of a lift and it's maybe 84 off the bat, okay, we're going to call that a flyout. And so some of this could be, up for debate a little bit. But from what I can tell, just talking to people inside the program, it's kind of tough to hit off of live pitching inside that indoor facility. In a ballpark, they have this thing called the batter's eye. This is real deep cut stuff. They have a thing called the batter's eye, which usually helps. They're like a little thing behind center field where you're able to pick up the baseball pretty easily. I don't know what it looks like. I've never personally hit inside the Fowler facility, but apparently it's harder to pick up, and you're facing these dudes that are throwing really hard, and it's easier for the guys to throw in an indoor facility, indoor controlled environment. And so maybe that plays into it, but I don't know. And I feel like years past, we've seen the offenses start picking on the pitchers a little bit because you've now seen these same pitchers 4 or 5 times. So that is very interesting. But to answer your question, Clayton, I am inclined to take that as a good sign. And I think back to last year's offseason where we kind of knew Arkansas was going to be pretty good on the mound. Like, you looked at it on paper, there weren't really many question marks, if at all, on the mound. We all kind of didn't know because of what Arkansas did in 2024 if they were going to hit. And so I was like, man, anytime the lineup hits in the scrimmages, I'm like, that's cool because we know we got good pitching. I kind of feel that way about this, where I'm like, listen, I don't know if Arkansas is going to be the best lineup in the SEC or if they're going to be, same what they did statistically last year, but you got some returners, you got some guys that you kind of know what you're getting on paper. So if this pitching staff is really shoving, and I think they said Cole Gibbler had 8 strikeouts in 4 innings or something like that, like that tells me he's throwing the ball pretty well. And I got to see some of these guys throw the first week, and they were throwing the ball pretty well. And so, you just have to kind of, it's up to us. We get to kind of choose your own adventure type of thing. See our boy Kingsley in here. Yeah. Let's see. Now we're talking about, we're in the stats section of this whole thing. And Ryan is correct. He says OPS over 1,000 means you're an absolute stud. Yes. Arkansas had a couple guys who cracked that last year. I think at one point, the big league average for OPS was like right around 700 or 750. And so really you could go with like anything over that, anything over 800, I would say you're an above average player. There's not war in college baseball, but like if your OPS is over 800, I would say you're like above replacement level. For example, like Reese Robinette last year, I would say he was like average at the plate. And I don't say that as a knock to him. I just feel like if you were like to rank hitters in the SEC, I feel like Reese Robinette would be right around there. Let's see. Reese Robinette hit, and his OPS was 838. I was able to do that math quickly because his on-base percentage was exactly 400, which is nice. Reese Robinette, who would you say is like a pretty solid, slightly above average hitter, his OPS last year was 838. I think that's a good little barometer. So if you're in that 900 range, like you're really, really swinging it well. Camo Gang wants to know who's throwing the funky cheese, which is interesting because I feel like when you say cheese, I'm thinking like fastball, like throw the high cheddar. But who's throwing the funky cheese? That's interesting to me. Well, I'll give you, Parker Coyle, I think, is a very obvious candidate, a guy that we don't really talk about a ton because, we kind of know what you're getting with Parker Coyle. He's big time in that. I mean, he doesn't really throw a ball straight. He doesn't really throw a four-seam fastball much, although apparently he's throwing a little bit harder this offseason. Really likes to throw that cutter. Like his cutter is his primary pitch, and then, of course, can throw a really, really sharp breaking ball behind it. Really good stuff. But I feel like Parker Coyle is like the kind of guy I think about when I think about guys on the roster that throw some cheese. Let me think about this for a second now. Joey Lorenzini, sneaky freshman who's like, 90, 92 with the fastball. He's one of those dudes, doesn't really throw the ball straight, doesn't really throw anything that doesn't break a little bit. So he's an interesting candidate there. But I don't know, man. There's a lot of flamethrowers on this Razorback roster. Steel Leaves, now I'm thinking about it, he's a decent candidate for this this funky cheese department. But you think about this Razorback team and not even like great pitchers, but just guys that are going to pitch for Arkansas, like Ethan McIlvain, a lot of velocity. Jackson Kershaw, a lot of velocity. Cooper Dossett, a lot of velocity. It's a lot of power arms for this Razorback team, and they're going to need guys that can do it all, man. But let's see. And then David says, doesn't the pros keep up with how much a player helps a team on defense? Yes, and from what I can tell, I don't look into it too much. I think people have kind of determined that they can be helpful, those defensive stats, but it's like a little tough. And wins above replacement, I think, counts in some type of defensive efficiency there. They have like outs above average, I think is the term they call it. So yeah, that's certainly something that I wish we had more access to stuff like that in college baseball. And I'm sure there's some site that does it, but yeah, sometimes that's just like eye test, it always is tough when people like cite errors as a way to knock on a guy, but Bass in the Ozarks, I got Trey says, what is the best stat to tell how good a pitcher is? Is it ERA or something else? So pitchers are really, it's tough because there's not like a one-stop shop. I don't know if there's an OPS version. I see some people saying whip, which now I'm thinking about it, it probably is whip, but it's like, I don't know. Pitchers, you really do have to kind of look at the full picture because it's all context dependent. Like if you're a closer, you're throwing fewer innings and stuff. What your stat line needs to look like looks a little bit different than what, your starter who's throwing 5-6 innings every game and is going to end up throwing 80, 90, 100. But whip is a very good one, I would say. I definitely love team whip because that's another one where it's like, it's really hard to fake a good whip. Like you don't have a good whip unless you are like at least, missing a fair amount of bats. And obviously you can't see stats, stats aren't, or strikeouts aren't factored into whip, but it's hard to have a low whip and not be pretty damn effective, especially with a large sample size. I feel like, oh my goodness. I'm seeing a super chat that I missed. Where did this sucker go? It's a fat boy too. I don't have the John Cena thing here, but our guy Jeremy Stewart, who we love here at Inside Arkansas, says, hey, funds for your trip to Arlington. We will see you there. That's awesome. I love that, Jeremy. And we appreciate you and your family, man. Appreciate you always repping us. And yeah, we will definitely see you in Arlington. Okay. I ended up going longer than I was supposed to on this. Like I thought I was going to be able to get this done in easily under an hour. We're going to end up going a little bit over an hour if that's okay with you guys. So I'll try to find the really good ones to really do this here. Let's see. So, okay. Old Mackinist says, if Gackel, Gibbler, Dietz end up as the three best starters, do you stick with Gabe on Friday or switch to left, right, left? And so I might be in the minority on this. I'm probably the wrong person to ask because personally, I don't really care. Like left, right does matter. And it matters a lot in terms of like, how you set your lineup, what matchups you want to do. Some guys are better against lefties. All that is relevant. But in terms of the order of how you're starting your guys day to day, I don't think it really matters. Like obviously when Gackel throws, they're going to, get some lefties in the lineup. They're going to try and like, to me, it doesn't really matter if that happens on Friday or Saturday. So I would just go with the best pitcher you have on your roster to start. I would just go with, like, if you think Gackel's the guy, which I think we all do, I would just roll with him there. But that's just my thought. I'm sure other people feel differently. And I know Dave has kind of done a little bit of everything in the past, but I think they're going to go right, left on opening weekend. Jeremy also says, nothing better than listening to Ellis talk hog baseball while we're sitting here watching our son do a pitching lesson with a former hog. Oh, very interesting. I'm curious to know which former hog. I don't know if he said it later in the chat, but that's pretty sick. Yeah. Real quick, I see Trey says, do you think Hunter Dietz will actually pitch this year? So knock on wood, of course. But yes, this is the first time we've never been at this point leading up to the season where Hunter Dietz has even been throwing at all. Like his freshman year, by this point, he was already on the shelf with an elbow injury. Last year, he wasn't even returned from his previous elbow surgery. Wasn't even on the mound doing anything. And so we've never been at a point where he's really throwing in these scrimmages leading up to the year. And so, he's definitely on track without a doubt to pitch this year. He's most likely going to be your Saturday starter to start. Will he be great? Will he fail? Who knows? But he's healthy. He's available. Let's knock on wood. I just hope we can see a full season out of the kid and would love that for him. And he's got a chance to really do some cool things here. Old Magnus also says, this is a great comment here. I like this. He says, if Big Country has a big year, he could definitely be an aura guy. He's paid his dues. So, okay, let me know what y'all think about this. You don't really use the term glue guy in baseball much because, most times when you're saying glue guy, it's a guy that kind of keeps the team together. And if you're in basketball, it's really, that's where you hear glue guy a lot. It's basketball, obviously. That's kind of, what you would use because it's a guy that's keeping your team together. And in baseball, it's an individual sport. It's a lot of guys just up there playing. So there's not much that the glue guy can do. But when I think of Reese Robinette, I think of glue guy because one, he's just solid, consistent, just goes about his business. I mean, they call him Big Country because he's Big Country. He's blue collar. He's also one of the older guys on the team, been around. I mean, this is 4th year as a Razorback. That's a guy that I think is an important leadership presence on the team as well. And I think he just kind of holds everything together. I think what's going to happen with Reese Robinette is we're not going to talk about him a ton because I don't think he's going to lead the team in average. I don't think he's going to lead the team in home runs or, RBI or anything crazy. But I also don't think we're ever going to debate who's starting at first base. I think he's just going to be consistent, solid, hit somewhere in the middle-ish of that lineup. And, that'll be the end of it. C. Till says, any freshman you were looking forward to seeing getting in some midweek action? Absolutely, man. So Mark Brissy has been, and he's from Batesville, but he played his senior year at Fayetteville High School, which I'm glad I heard someone say that the other day because it made me think I was going crazy for a while because I remember Mark Brissy being a pitcher at Fayetteville High School. And so I think there was one point early in the fall where I was like, oh, yeah, Mark Brissy, he's a, local guy. I mean, he's a Fayetteville guy. And then he's listed on the roster as Batesville. And I'm like, did I make that up? Like, how did that happen? But he just played his senior year at Fayetteville. Mark Brissy has been the most impressive freshman. And apparently he's been throwing like 96, 97, which is definitely notable. The last time I saw him, he was like 93 to 95, but like really had a good feel for both off-speed pitches, has a legitimate changeup as a hard-throwing right-handed freshman, which is pretty rare, honestly. And so he's a stud. I think he might be a guy that could be a future weekend starter. We'll see if they end up using him in that midweek starting role. He might honestly be too valuable. I think they might use him out of the bullpen early on in his freshman year. And so it's like, do you really want to use him as a midweek starter if you're going to use him at the end of games? Potentially that's something they'll have to think about. Peyton Lee, another in-state kid from Maumelle, seems like he's really starting to come on here the last few weeks after Christmas break. Jordan Martin, who's from Missouri, was former basketball player. He was a two-way guy in high school, basketball, baseball. You really don't see that combo that often, but the Wiggins boys both did that. Jordan Martin is very, very talented, very, very raw. And I think he's going to probably be a guy that has some ups and downs. And I'm sure some people are going to write him off and say, oh man, I saw him the other day and he walked 3 guys. He sucks. He's one of those guys, you want to talk about guys that could take a big jump at different points in their career. I think he's certainly in that mix for sure. And Joey Lorenzini, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think is a really solid left-handed freshman who might not get, crazy, closing opportunities or anything, but I think he's going to get some left on left work. I think he's going to appear in some of these midweek games, and we'll just see. It seems like he threw really well, really, really well. The one scrimmage that we got to see was a really good day for Joey Lorenzini. Excited to see what he can do as well. Papa Dragon says, Pompey is my ceiling razor pick. If he is able to keep the pace he had last year before the injury or even exceed it, then that's some major firepower. No, you're 100% right on that, man. TJ Pompey, and I think I saw Ryan in the chat earlier saying TJ Pompey could make a lot of money this summer. Certainly true. He's a guy that is very much on that scout's radar, and like you said, Papa Dragon, like had a really solid freshman year. Freshman Big 12, freshman All-American, hits 280, 10 home runs. You can kind of see the vision of what he could be, and it looked like he was on track to do that last year. He's hitting 350 damn near, had 5 home runs in 19 games, which, you know, that's on pace for like something. I think that's on pace for like 28 or 30 home runs or something like that. Maybe he wouldn't have done that, but it's like, I'd say at the bare minimum, you were looking at a guy that was probably going to hit about 15 home runs and hit around 300. And so if that had happened, we would likely be seeing him as a preseason All-America, preseason everything. But yeah, it's very interesting. You know, he's a guy that I think I'm trying not to put too much pressure on him because I feel like he's kind of underrated right now, and I want to keep it that way. And frankly, I wouldn't say he's been bad in the scrimmages, but I don't think he's like blown it away or torn it up in any crazy fashion. But the same could be said for guys like Cam Kojal and Charles Davalon last year. Our guy Peyton from Blue Ember, shout out to Blue Ember in the house. He says, I feel like you addressed this, but do you feel like you will have a better idea of who starts in left field after this weekend's scrimmages? I know you also talked about Dave talked about platooning it. No, I think that's definitely, platooning is definitely a possibility. And honestly, no matter who they start opening day, it's not going to be a situation where it's like, hey, we're starting Damian Ruiz in left field, and if he hits well, we're just never going to take him out. I think you're going to probably, I would imagine in the first opening weekend when you play 4 games, I think you probably see at least 2 guys start there in left field and maybe even a third guy rotate in. What's interesting to me is that Zach Stewart isn't really being talked about as a starting option. And I'm not saying that's like incorrect. You know, I think that's interesting. And it also speaks to how good Christian Turner has been and how effective he's been for Arkansas and sort of what they think of him and the upside he has. You want to talk about guys that could raise the floor of this or raise the ceiling of this team. If Christian Turner and Carson Brumbaugh really end up being dudes as freshmen, changes things a good bit, man, for sure. I lost the chat, but I saw someone say, do we have a closer? And I do want to answer that because I got to be honest with you. That is a valid question. And I'm not saying that Arkansas like doesn't have several options on the, you know, to close games out. And there's certainly some guys that fit the bill from a talent standpoint. You know, I think Jackson Kersher, the Oklahoma transfer, who's been throwing the ball really well, big athletic guy. It's 6'4", 6'5", and he throws 98. Certainly looks like a closer to me. Ethan McIlvain has closed SEC games before at Vanderbilt. Didn't have a great year last year, but he's a guy that I certainly wouldn't hate. I mean, he closed out games against Tennessee last year. I think he's certainly a candidate. Steele Eves is a guy that they have a lot of trust in. He doesn't necessarily fit the archetype of what you think of as a closer. I mean, in big league games, closing is literally just ninth inning, come in, throw as hard as you can. And so that's sort of what I think of when I think of closer, but Steele Eves could be kind of a hybrid multi-inning type of closer, or maybe just a back end of the bullpen weapon. But right now, honestly, Parker Coyle, by the way, another guy that, like Steele Eves, doesn't necessarily fit the archetype of what you think a closer is, but certainly is someone they have a lot of trust in, and I think is going to be in that mix. James DeCramer, Oregon State transfer, another guy that I feel like deserves a mention and has, you know, stuff that kind of looks closery. I'm going to go with Jackson Kersher, though, man. I really, really like the way he threw the other day. I think he also has like the right kind of mentality. Like he has a little bit of that bulldog in him on the mound. I like seeing that. And I think he's a guy that could take a huge jump as a sophomore. Ryan says, which of our guys is most likely to improve and which is most likely to regress? So Nolan Souza for me is like the obvious one. And I kind of predicted this last year and I was a year early, so I don't want to go all in on the Nolan Souza thing. But I think if you look at his numbers, to say that he's underachieved or really underachieved last year would be an understatement. You know, and what's weird about it is you think of Nolan Souza and you think, oh, he strikes out too much, but he's got a lot of power and a lot of speed. We didn't see a ton of the power last year. I think his slugging percentage was like low 400s last year. He had 4 home runs, you know, not bad, but like he was on pace for like 8 or 9 home runs last year. There is infinitely more power left in the tank from Nolan Souza. Weirdly enough, he drew so many walks. Nolan Souza drew almost as many walks in half the season that Cam Kojal drew in a full season. Now, of course, Cam Kojal's a stud. He hit 333. Like, I'm not saying that as a knock on him, but like that tells you that Nolan Souza is an above average in terms of patience at the plate, not swinging at pitches out of the zone. And, and when he got in trouble early in the years, when he was swinging at pitches outside of the zone, he's going to take a ton of walks, especially if that power really shows up the way it is. And so I think Nolan Souza is probably a guy that, he hit 250 last year, hit 255 as a freshman. I think he'll bump that up. But even if he doesn't bump the average up that much, like let's just say he hits 275. If Nolan Souza hits 275, I think there's a chance he's hitting 12, 15 home runs. He's definitely stealing double-digit bases. He stole like 9 last year and half the year. And I think he's going to draw some walks. I think we talk about OPS. I think Nolan Souza would have like a 950 OPS if he hit 275. And so he's one for sure. And I don't, most likely to regress is a tough one. Cahillo is one that I think you have to look at solely because he wasn't that good in SEC play last year. Which, if you looked at Robert Moore, the year before Robert Moore had a huge regression, he was bad in SEC play in 2021. He had a tremendous tear to start the year, but kind of stunk in SEC play. And then in 2022, his SEC play was kind of his full season. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to Cahillo. And in fact, I'm not predicting for you that Cahillo is going to regress. I actually think he's going to up his power production. His batting average could drop. I mean, he was 317. So like if his batting average drops to 290, it's not the end of the world, especially if the power pops up. But I would definitely have to go with Cahillo in terms of most likely to regress. Griff says, does Brumbaugh or Pompey start at short? Seems like Brumbaugh. And I think Dave said yesterday, if the season started today, he would probably be starting Brumbaugh. I think he's the slightly better defender. I don't think there's a wide, range there. The thing that I've noticed is that Brumbaugh is almost better at short than he is at third. And I think Pompey is better at third than he is at short. And honestly, man, I think it is that simple. Like, I don't think we need to make it any more complicated than that. And so if I were predicting for you, I think Brumbaugh will start at short. Don't rule out Nolan Souza, though, man. I think if he gets healthy and that arm gets back, we will see, man. Showtime Fantasy Podcast says, Andrew, talk me off the ledge, which honestly, this might end up being the last chat that I get to, because honestly, I mistimed this whole thing. There was nobody in at the beginning, and I got a little bit worried where I was like, damn, I'm going to have to filibuster a little bit. After a while, it started to ramp up a little bit, and so I'm seeing some comments that I frankly wish I had gotten to earlier. But I was a little bit nervous. I thought I was gonna have to fill time. But Showtime Fantasy says, Andrew, talk me off the ledge. I don't want to allow myself to get emotionally invested yet because the ended the same way every time. I'm gonna present to you a visual of a meme that you already know. It's the guy who's mining underground. He's looking for those diamonds. And he's right there before the wall ends, but he turned around. He took his little pickaxe and he went back, not knowing there were diamonds on the other end. That is the case. I mean, there really isn't anything else to say other than that. Listen, I totally do understand it. Like, I really do get it. Of like, it just, you're like, man, I just don't think they're ever going to get it done. And frankly, if they're not going to win a national title, then I don't care. But one thing I said at the end of last year is like, because a lot of people do this thing where when the season ends, they say, oh, so it was all for nothing, which implies that like the only reason we're watching is to watch Arkansas win a national title. I understand that's the goal. I understand that's what we want to happen. That's what we're cheering for to happen. But at least me personally, and I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you guys feel this way, I do not think that Arkansas winning the national title is why I'm watching. I'm watching because I love the program, because I love Dave, love the guys on the team, and frankly, because when I was growing up, that's what I wanted to do. If I had been good enough, I would have done anything. And frankly, I think about it all the time where I'm like, damn, if I just worked a little bit harder, maybe I could have walked on and done whatever. Like, that's why I watch Arkansas baseball, because like of what the program means to me personally, what it's meant to a lot of people, and Baum is just kind of home. Of course, I won't really be truly 100% satisfied if they win the national title. But if like that's the only thing, then it's like, I don't know, man. I feel like that's a little bit, that kind of reduces the whole sport and the whole journey and the whole experience down to just one specific thing. And frankly, I think you guys might realize that when Arkansas does win a national title, because it will feel awesome. We will feel rewarded. We will feel satisfied. We will celebrate like there's no tomorrow. But I think you're still going to be excited for the next season, and not because you're like desperate for them to win the national title, but because you're emotionally invested in the team. And I'm a very big believer that the more you put into something, the more context you have, the more reason to care you have, and like the more kind of you give to it, the more you get back. And in this case, it doesn't mean that the more we invest into the season, the more Arkansas is going to win. But I think it definitely does make it sweeter when they do win, because you get to remember the hard times, you get to remember the tough times. And for you personally, like listen, I genuinely, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life. If you do say, you know what, F it, I'm out on baseball season this year. Wouldn't that be the worst feeling ever if then they did win the national title and we all got to parade and celebrate? And you would probably sneak your way onto the float and be like, oh yeah, I'm happy we won. But like low key, you'd have to know in your heart, like, damn, I don't even know these players. I don't even know their stories. I don't even know their journeys because I wasn't tapped in the whole way. I feel like that fear should scare you a lot more than the fear of, them just coming up short, which is very, very possible, frankly. All right, I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any like super big bangers. I see Kopesky here wants to know real quick about Ruiz. Is he struggling? What about Stewart? So listen, Ruiz, I haven't been at the scrimmages the last couple of weekends, so I can't tell you for sure. Ruiz wasn't bad in the fall. I think we keep track of the numbers in the fall when we're there. I think he hit 286 in the fall, if I'm remembering correctly, which isn't a bad batting average. Drew a few walks here and there. Wasn't bad, but he didn't hit for a ton of power. And we just didn't see that like pop where it was like, oh yeah, this dude's for sure in the lineup. And at the time in the fall, it was Britton Clark who was kind of stealing the show, getting on base a ton, hitting some home runs, hitting the ball oppo, like just on base constantly. And so in the fall, from my vantage point, Britton Clark solidified his spot in the lineup, and it kind of put Ruiz in question of like, is he going to DH? Is he going to be a spot starter? What's happening? And then Britton Clark gets injured. So it kind of de facto moved Ruiz there. But honestly, man, Christian Turner was so good in the fall and was good in the one scrimmage we got to watch this spring. And so I feel like Christian Turner's emergence is the bigger story here. Stewart, I would say the same kind of thing about. Now, Stewart's also an interesting case where he had a tremendous junior or sophomore year. He was a draft eligible sophomore, hit like 21 home runs, hit like 320 or something like that. And then his junior year at Missouri State, all of his numbers dropped off. His power cut in half. His batting average dipped off a good bit. His strikeout rate was up. And so it's like, that's kind of the big question there is like, all right, which one was the real Zach Stewart? I think at the very least, Stewart is an overqualified bench option, like a left-handed bat off the bench. And he may very well end up being that. But I think between those three guys, one of them is going to wind up emerging from the pack. I'm still leaning with Ruiz. I'm not, certainly not giving up on the dude, but it's definitely not a secret that he hasn't put this discussion completely to bed, which frankly, when they signed him, he was hitting 388 at Lamar. I don't think there was any doubt. It was like, oh yeah, this dude's definitely going to be in the lineup. The fact that we're even having the conversation kind of tells you, it might not be a fairy tale ending, but I think Ruiz is a stud, frankly. And I think it's going to end up being similar to Logan Maxwell, Charles Davalon, because frankly, it was the same thing with them last year. We didn't enter the season being like, oh yeah, Charles Davalon's about to hit 350 and be a first round pick. But then he ended up doing it. I'm not saying Ruiz is going to do that at all. But sometimes these scrimmages, small sample size, you just don't see all the flash. Well, guys, I appreciate you for doing this. Seriously, the second edition of this one is going to be way better for a multitude of reasons. One, I'm going to give you guys proper heads up to know when we're doing it and kind of know, so it won't be just last minute, spur of the moment. Especially because yesterday on the show I said it was going to be Wednesday, and now here it is tonight. Next week's edition will be better. I will be less nervous about the viewership and time I need to fill, and so I'll be able to get to more of your questions. I apologize for that. Plus, it's just me. I'm just riding solo. It's like Castaway here. No John, no Curtis, no interns, no nothing. Just raw dogging it. So patience, if you will. But no, we're gonna keep doing this thing, man. And I love talking baseball, man. This was a lot of fun, and so we're gonna continue to do these things week in, week out. next week, man, it's the season. And so continue to tap into what we've got going on. We're going to have at least 2 more Baumbastic Podcast episodes this week. One, we're going to talk a little bit about the power potential of this Razorback team. And then, of course, on Friday, hopefully, fingers crossed, Mother Nature, please comply, we're going to have some scrimmage action. So we will be able to talk about what happened at the scrimmage, who looked good, all that jazz. And so appreciate you guys for tuning in. Sorry if I didn't get to all your questions, and I don't think I missed any super chats, but appreciate everybody for tuning in, man. This was awesome. And we're going to keep it rolling, man, here on the Baumbastic Podcast. Baseball season very close. So we'll get out of here. You guys have a great one, and we'll see you next week.